Some crimes are too brutal to forget, but it's what happened after the verdict that left the world speechless. These female convicts committed unimaginable acts, but their courtroom reactions turned tragedy into something even more disturbing. One by one, their final words and haunting expressions stunned judges, shattered families, and broke the internet.
My parents have them. They are spending their time with my parents.
On May 15, 2021, Tempe police answered a strange call from 44-year-old Yui Inoue. She'd reported hearing voices in her home. When officers arrived, they found a scene no one could forget. In the living room lay 7-year-old Kai and 9-year-old Mia, her 2 children. Each had been struck more than 100 times with a meat cleaver. Blood splattered the walls. The cleaver itself lay broken on the floor. Toys lay scattered, untouched. A neighbor told investigators they heard muffled screams the night before. The 911 call Inoue made at dawn was calm, almost methodical. "I heard something, please come." By the time officers forced open her front door, the horror was clear. Instead of fleeing, Inoue did something chilling. She walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and tried to wash off her hands and arms. She rinsed the cleaver under the tap, then wiped it clean and wrapped it in a towel. Back in the living room, she draped a blanket over the bodies and carefully arranged pillows around them. With a basket of clothes in one hand and the wrapped cleaver in the other, she stepped outside and crossed the street to the local police station. Inside, she walked up to the desk and said calmly, I did it. I heard voices telling me to kill them. Officers led her behind a partition and read her rights. Even as she sat in the holding cell, Inoue never cried or showed fear. She only repeated, "They were telling me to hurt my babies." In February 2025, the case came to court. The prosecutor laid out every grim detail, the hundreds of cuts on Kai and Mia.
Trying to emotionally help and guide the staff at school, along with Mia and Kai's friends, was truly an extremely difficult thing to do.
The broken cleaver. The cleanup attempt that showed she knew what she'd done. The defense cited a severe mental health crisis. Inoue had tried therapy and medication, but the voices grew louder. After a week of testimony, the jury needed just 3 hours to decide. They returned a guilty verdict on 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of child abuse, and 1 count of disorderly conduct. For the false 911 call, Inoue showed little emotion as the foreperson read the verdict. She stared straight ahead, breathing evenly, as if she were watching a play. On May 2nd, 2025, Superior Court Judge Jeffrey Reuter delivered the harshest penalty Arizona law allows. He sentenced Yui Inoue to 2 natural life terms. 1,
most difficult cases that I have dealt with in my 17.5 years on the bench. I can't imagine what those children went through.
for each child, plus 35 additional years for abuse and the false report. He said her actions were the deepest betrayal a parent can commit, and that the cleanup and surrender showed cold calculation, not a moment of mercy. As the judge pronounced no possibility of parole, Inoue's shoulders slumped. But the real shock came next. Through a court-provided interpreter, she stood and spoke softly. "I'm sorry. My children are safe, with my parents." Gasps filled the packed courtroom. The children's grandparents wept openly. One woman in the gallery shouted, "They're dead! You killed them!" Court officers moved to restore order as Inoue shook her head, locked eyes on the interpreter, and repeated, "My babies are with Grandma and Grandpa."
Hay mucho dolor que tengo con respecto a la pérdida de mi bebé Yayin.
There's so much pain that I have in regards to the loss of my baby family.
Between June 6th and June 16th, 2023, neighbors in Cleveland noticed something was wrong at Crystal Candelario's home. They heard the faint sound of a toddler crying. Then the silence lasted days. Finally, someone called the police. When officers entered, they found 16-month-old Jalen in a playpen. The child was alive, but on the edge of death. She was severely dehydrated, weighed just 11 pounds, and had no food in her stomach. Paramedics tried life support, but little Jalen died before dawn. An autopsy revealed she had not eaten or drunk water for more than a week.
Will be Deanna Robertson, and the first pre-trial will be July 5th at 9 o'clock.
Bruises on her arms suggested she'd tried to crawl out, but her mother never returned. Candelario, 28, claims she left for a short trip and meant to come back. But records showed she spent that time at a friend's house, posting selfies and sharing laughs on social media. In February 2024, faced with overwhelming proof, text messages planning her getaway, security camera footage showing her leaving the house, and the autopsy report, Candelario entered a guilty plea.
Dios y mi hija me han perdonado.
God and my daughter have forgiven me.
She admitted guilt to aggravated murder and child endangerment. Under Ohio's laws, a guilty plea allowed prosecutors to drop multiple other charges, speeding up the case. During a brief plea hearing, she stood in jeans and a plain top. Her hands trembled as she told the judge, "I'm sorry for my actions. I never meant for Jalen to die." Defense lawyers argued she was overwhelmed by postpartum depression and lacked support. The prosecutor called her story an excuse and pointed out the social media posts showing her partying. On March 18, 2024, Judge Brendan Sheehan took the bench.
I look in the back of this courtroom and I see law enforcement, I see individuals who have worked on this case, who are here.
Prosecutors asked for life without parole, calling the crime the ultimate betrayal of motherhood. Defense asked for a lighter term, citing her mental health struggles. Sheehan spoke without notes. He reminded the room of the tiny coffin, the funeral flowers, and the empty seat at family gatherings. He said, "When a mother abandons her child to die, she commits the darkest sin." Jalen trusted her mother for everything. That trust was shattered. He then sentenced Candelario to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At that moment, Candelario broke down. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She clutched at the front of the defense table and bowed her head. In a voice cracked by sobs, she whispered,
Pero nadie sabe cuánto yo estaba sufriendo.
But nobody knew how much I was suffering.
"God and my daughter have forgiven me. I pray you will too." The judge paused, his jaw tight. He called for order. Neighbors in the gallery who had rallied for justice nodded in relief. A woman wearing a Justice for Jalen ribbon whispered, "She got what she deserved." Candelario's tear-filled apology was the only thing she said. She never looked at the child's grieving father, who sat stone-faced. The judge ordered her out of the courtroom under guard. As she passed the gallery, a dozen reporters called her name, but she kept her head down, her shoulders shaking. On March 13th, 2022, Wyoming Township Police got a frantic call from 21-year-old Sakina Muhammad's mother. She'd overheard her daughter arguing on the phone, then silence. When officers arrived at Sakina's home, they found 27-year-old Quan Winston lying at the bottom of the stairwell with a single, fatal gunshot wound to his temple. Winston's body was slumped against the wall, his clothes stained with blood, and the pistol lay empty nearby. Sakina and her 11-month-old daughter, Amira, were nowhere to be found. Inside the apartment, signs of a struggle were clear. A reading lamp lay broken on the floor, and a smashed coffee table revealed shards of glass. Witnesses later told detectives they'd heard Winston begging Sakina not to shoot him. Instead of fleeing, she grabbed Amira, her baby daughter, and disappeared into the night.
On Quan's behalf, karma has no menu. You get served what you deserve. Karma has no expiration date.
The day after the shooting, Sakina walked into the Kent County Sheriff's Office with her daughter in her arms and quietly surrendered. She showed no visible wounds and offered no resistance. In a calm voice, she said, "I did it to protect myself. He was trying to kill me." Investigators booked her on first-degree murder and felony firearm charges. Evidence included phone records showing a protective order violation. Winston had ignored a no-contact order, and surveillance video of Sakina returning home just before 9 p.m. On March 13th, forensic tests confirmed the bullet matched the gun found at the scene. Her trial began in late December 2023. Prosecutors painted a picture of a jealous, controlling relationship. Winston had a history of domestic violence, and neighbors recalled hearing loud fights and crashes late at night.
We have come back and forth to court, angry and enraged, but praying to God to deliver us.
Defense attorneys argued self-defense, citing Winston's prior arrests for assault and a bruise on Sakina's neck when she turned herself in. Despite the defense's plea, the jury deliberated for just 2 days before reaching a verdict. In January 2024, they found Sakina Muhammad guilty of first-degree murder and felony firearm. The courtroom fell silent when the foreperson read the word guilty. It was the swiftest decision anyone there could remember. On January 17, 2024, Judge Lisa Harper took the bench and delivered her ruling. She noted that while domestic abuse is real, the law requires clear evidence of imminent danger. In Sakina's case, the lack of defensive wounds on Winston and the empty escape routes suggested a calculated act, not a panic-driven response. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I'm the judge who sat through the trial. I'm certainly not going to go through the entire week's worth of testimony. What I will say is that
she told Sakina, "Your child will grow up without a father because you chose to kill him, rather than seek help." As the gavel fell, Sakina's shoulders drooped and she bowed her head. After the sentence, the judge asked Sakina if she wished to address the court. She stood slowly, hands clasped, and in a soft voice said, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I'm so sorry to my daughter." No one spoke for a full minute. Then Winston's mother rose from the gallery, her face flushed with rage and grief. "Karma has no expiration date," she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. "You left my son to die, and now he's gone forever." Family members wept openly. Sakina turned her head away, her lips trembling, but she said nothing more.
Ms. Boone, the court sentences you to life in the Department of Corrections, with credit time served that Madam Clerk will provide to you momentarily.
In February 2020, on a quiet street in Orlando, Florida, neighbors spotted a woman dragging a heavy suitcase from her car into her apartment. That woman was 42-year-old Sarah Boone. Authorities later learned Sarah and her boyfriend, 35-year-old Jorge Torres Jr., had been drinking wine and playing a twisted version of hide and seek. Witnesses said they heard laughter, then Jorge calling for help. Inside the apartment, police found Jorge zipped inside a large travel case. His muted screams echoed through the hall as officers unlatched the latches. By the time they freed him, he was unconscious. Paramedics declared him dead at the scene. Jorge's lungs were filled with cloth fibers, and experts determined he died of asphyxiation. Phone records uncovered by detectives revealed Sarah had filmed Jorge's pleas for mercy. In the videos, she chuckled and said, "It's just a game."
And the reason why you were even downstairs and weak enough to get drunk was because you don't give a shit about me. You don't listen to what I say.
One clip ended abruptly when the camera fell. Detectives recovered the footage from her phone, marking it as key evidence. Sarah Boone was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. At her trial in October 2024, jurors saw the video clips, the medical examiner's testimony, and witness accounts. The defense argued the killing was accidental. Sarah claimed she forgot Jorge was in the suitcase after she passed out, but jurors found that story impossible to believe. After 4 days of testimony, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict. Even seasoned courtroom observers said they had never seen a quicker decision in a murder case. As the verdict was announced, Sarah remained motionless, her gaze fixed on the defense table. On December 2nd, 2024, Judge Marcia Delaney sentenced Sarah to life in prison.
The court has had the opportunity to review the evidence and testimony that was presented at trial. The victim impact statements presented here today.
The courtroom was packed. Family members of Jorge, friends, and strangers drawn by the case's cruelty. Judge Delaney said, "There was no accidental intent here. This was a deliberate act of cruelty." She emphasized the betrayal of trust between lovers and the cold, mocking tone of the videos. Sarah stood quietly as the sentence was read. When told life, her lips barely moved. The judge declined any request for leniency, citing the callous nature of the crime. Unlike many defendants who wept or pleaded, Sarah Boone showed no emotion. She sat upright, hands folded, eyes forward. After the judge adjourned, reporters watched her as she packed a small bag and prepared to leave.
The arguments of the state and the arguments of the defense. The court pronounces sentence as follows.
Instead of coming straight off the bench, Sarah mailed the court a surprising gift, a 28-page handwritten letter demanding her innocence. In the letter, she wrote, "I am not a murderer. I am a survivor of a freak accident and a system bent on my destruction." She accused the judge of bias and the media of sensationalism. When officials read the letter in open court, a collective gasp rose from the back rows. Family members of Jorge, present for sentencing, collapsed into tears. His sister, Maria Torres, pressed her hand to her mouth and sobbed, "He loved games." But this wasn't a game. It was murder. Their cries filled the room. A friend of Jorge stood and said, "She could have just called an ambulance. Instead, she turned his last moments into a sick joke."
Come on, you're Miss Lopez. Come on over here to the podium. The matter is before the court today to review the status of this current attorney.
On the evening of November 8th, 2023, in Shepherdsville, Kentucky, neighbors heard frantic gunshots coming from a small, tidy house on Maple Street. Inside, 34-year-old Tiffany Lucas stood over her two young sons, Maurice, age 6, and Jaden, age 9, each lying sprawled on the living room floor. According to the police report, Maurice was shot once in the head. Jaden took 2 bullets to the temple. When officers kicked in the door, Lucas didn't run. She held a smoking pistol in one hand and her youngest son's backpack in the other. Blood had splattered the blue carpet, and the boys' school books lay open, as if they'd been doing homework before the shooting. On the wall, a TV still played cartoons. The bright colors a chilling contrast to the dark scene. Lucas told police, "I'm sorry, it was the internet's fault." She blamed a viral social media challenge, though no record of such a trend existed. Investigators dusted the gun for prints, all hers, and checked her phone. They found no messages or threats, just her frantic 911 call. "I didn't mean to do it. I just snapped."
Listen up. The matter is before the court on the defendant's motion to review the status of her plea.
In October 2024, Tiffany Lucas stood quietly in a Shelby County courtroom for her plea hearing. Prosecutors offered to drop a possible death penalty case if she agreed to plead guilty to 2 counts of capital murder. Defense lawyers argued Lucas was suffering a mental break, pointing to online searches for how to erase bad thoughts and a history of depression. Lucas took the deal. She told the judge, "I accept responsibility. I'll live with this pain." The judge asked if she truly understood.
To ask you to leave now. I don't want to hold anybody in contempt. That's not what needs to happen at this point. But I cannot allow you to continue your outbursts in the court.
She nodded, tears in her eyes. The courtroom was packed with reporters, some holding pictures of Maurice and Jaden in school uniforms, their bright faces frozen in happier times. By pleading guilty, Lucas avoided a death sentence. The courtroom buzzed as the paperwork moved forward. A clerk read her rights one more time. Lucas responded with a small, sad smile. No one clapped. The room was too tense. On November 22, 2024, under heavy security, Lucas returned to court for her sentencing. Judge Rodney Burris, known for firm rulings in violent cases,
Question of violations of the laws of this Commonwealth, particularly statutory murder, which provides for a violation.
Took just a few moments to speak. He said, "You killed 2 innocent children in cold blood. There is no room for mercy." Lucas was led to a chair beside her attorney. She wore a pale blue jumpsuit and held a small notebook. Judge Burris imposed 2 consecutive life sentences, one for Maurice, one for Jaden. He denied any chance of parole. "You will spend the rest of your life in prison," he concluded. The moment those words echoed, something remarkable happened. The packed courtroom burst into applause. Gasps and cheers mixed with sobs as strangers offered a rare, raw show of relief. Family members leapt to their feet. Maurice and Jaden's grandmother, Teresa Finch, pounded her fist on the railing and shouted,
You know we love Jaden and Maurice. You know Jaden was the only thing we had left.
"You will feel my suffering every day you breathe." Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks as she stared down at Lucas.
You took him from me. And I hurt every day. Every second.
Other relatives nodded and clapped, voices shaky but loud. Justice for the boys. These 7 cases show that when love turns deadly, the courtroom becomes a stage for shock and sorrow. From Yui Inoue's chilling denial to Crystal Candelario's broken prayers, each reaction laid bare the human cost behind the headlines. Which moment shook you the most? The stunned silence in Iowa or the applause in Kentucky?